counselor from Alston Brighton, right? Because I'm the only counselor from Alston Brighton. Today is Monday, May 21st. We are here with our good friends from the Boston Fire Department regarding dockets 0559 through 0563, orders for the fiscal year 19 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations, annual appropriations for the school department, appropriation for other post-employment benefits, appropriation for certain transportation and public realm improvements, and appropriation for certain park improvements, as well as dockets 0564 and 0565, capital budget appropriations, including loan orders and lease and purchase agreements. I'd like to remind folks in the chamber that this is a public hearing, both broadcast and recorded on RCN 82, Comcast 8, and Verizon 1964, and streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV. I'd ask you all in the chamber to silence electronic devices. At the conclusion of our department's presentation and questions from my colleagues, we will take public testimony. If you so choose, there are sign-in sheets to my left. We ask that you state your name, affiliation, residence, and please check the box if you do wish to testify. I'd like to introduce my colleagues in order of their arrival. To my left, Councillor Ed Flynn, Councillor Michael Flaherty, and to my immediate right, Councillor Tim McCarthy, the Chair of Public Safety, and to my far left again, Councillor Ayanna Presley. I'd also like to recognize we're joined by Local 718 President Richie Paris and Bob Petiti. Thanks for joining us today. And with that, Commissioner, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Councilor. First, I'd like to thank Mayor Walsh for his continued support as we rebuild the Boston Fire Department. I would also like to thank the Mayor's staff and the Office of Budget Management for their diligence and insight as we prepare the FY19 budget. I'd like to specifically thank Justin Sterrett, Joanna Bernstein, and David Yurkovich for their assistance. I would also like to thank my budget team, comprised of Deputy Commissioner of Administration and Finance Kathleen Judge, Senior Budget Analyst Bill Czar, and Analyst Vandana Toretti for the hard work they put into this year's budget. And I would like to thank the City Council for your continued support of the Boston Fire Department and for holding this hearing on the Fire Department budget. If I could, I'm just going to introduce a few people that are sitting with me at the tables here. We have, to my immediate right, Chief of Operations for Support Services, John Walsh. To my immediate right is Deputy Commissioner Connie Wong. To my immediate left is Deputy Commissioner Kathleen Judge, Administration and Finance. And to my far left is Deputy Chief of Operations, Gerard Fontana, Charge of Field Operations. The FY19 is an important year for us on several fronts. First, the safety, health, and wellness of the firefighters remains my primary focus. This focus ranges from purchase of new apparatus, renovating and rebuilding our firehouses, to my commitment to ensuring the safety and dignity of all firefighters, including women and minorities, especially with respect to intimidation and discrimination. Since 2016, we have replaced 34 frontline apparatus. In FY19, we will receive 3 more engines and 3 more ladders, which will leave us with remaining 13 apparatus that will need to be replaced. The average age of the remaining 9 engines is over 14 years, and the remaining 4 ladders are over 9 years. We also recently received a Tower Ladder 3. After the collapse of Tower Ladder 10, we've also received approval to replace this piece. In addition, as a result of new apparatus, we've been able to revitalize our reserve fleet. For replacement of firehouses, we currently have a conceptual design complete for Engine 42 Rescue 2 in the Eggleston Square section of the city. We hope to remove them to their temporary site in the fall and begin construction in the spring. Tentative schedule highlights completion in October 2020. Renovations for Engine 50 and Engine 5 continue. We hope to have both reopened in the fall. We will continue to make progress on the mission to find ways to improve overall health and wellness of the members. We have successfully industrial cleaned Engine Company 16. We have been very happy with the results, and we continue the cleaning projects with additional 3 to 4 firehouses. We continue to sustain our training hours at around 28,000 hours per year up from approximately $8,000 from FY13. We received an AFG grant for a wind and heat simulator to be added to our training academy next year, and additional driver training hours given the insurgence of new apparatus. We are planning another recruit class in the fall. I remain committed to working with the Civil Service to identify diverse candidates. The last class hired this February yielded 28 diverse recruits as a result of identifying on the Civil Service list people with specific and second languages capabilities. In addition, my diversity officer, Juan Sanchez, continues to identify interventions in schools, military recruitment offices, and other teenage venues to get to a diverse population before they enter into the military service. We are hopeful that we will be able to attract diverse recruits at the return from active military service. Some of the programs Juan has initiated include the following: the ABCD High School Teen Academy Summer Program. Students between the ages of 16 and 18 get inside perspective on the Fire Academy. Madison Park and English High Schools All Fired Up Explorer Program. Throughout the school year, students job shadow, prep for fire exams, and participate in the fitness challenge, learn about fire prevention, and tour the firehouses. Summer Explorers, sponsored by PIC and the PFD Boston Fire Department Credit Union, are trained by fire department members to reach out to students over a six-week period in various summer camps across the city to educate on fire safety and prevention. We also have a high school ROTC boot camp, a program to reach out to future recruits at various high schools about job opportunities with a fitness challenge at the end of each session. Outreach through ball, the OTB program. The Boston Fire Department basketball team hosts games in the community centers and teen centers with an after-game question and answer about the benefits of being a Boston firefighter. We also have initiated a number of events specific to the veteran community, since the fire department is restricted by state law as far as hiring and veterans' preference. We have the Soldier for Life program by working with the Army transition counselors to track qualified individuals for internships prior to take the exam. The Brave Partnership by working with advisory board to help veterans gain employment in the USO Mentor Program. You have read the media reports about complaints by female firefighters regarding the work environment at the fire department. We take those concerns very seriously. The Boston Fire Department is committed to a diversity and inclusion in its workforce of minorities and women. It seeks to provide all its employees with an environment that is welcoming, respectful, and free of any harassment and discrimination. With that, Council, I'll turn it over to you for questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we've just been joined by Councilor Matt O'Malley and Councilor Kim Janey. Thank you. Let me recognize Councilor Ed Flynn for first line of questioning.
Okay.
And Councilor Frank Baker has joined us as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Councilor, as well. Commissioner, can you talk about the health and wellness program as it relates to industrial cleaning? Is that the program where you thoroughly clean the insides of the firehouses and try to get all the chemicals out? And can you give us a little bit of background on that?
Sure. Knowing that capital dollars are scarce, and the city is actually building 2 new firehouses, renovating 2 additional, and moving down that direction, we started an industrial cleaning process of all our remaining firehouses. The average age of our firehouse is 76 years old. There has been a firehouse built in the city since I think it's over 25 years, and that was built with private funds as a 3P partnership for the Engine 10s located on Purchase Street. So the city hasn't built a firehouse in the city in quite some time, 35 years. The industrial cleaning process is we go in, we relocate the companies, take them out of their houses, reassign them to different other houses in their district, and we go in for about a 4 to 6 week period of time where we industrial clean the house, from air handling systems, ventilation systems, heating, furnaces, anything that needs to be cleaned is cleaned, steam cleaned, power washed. We also remove all permeable materials, whether it's couches, mattresses, anything that it could be contaminated. We remove them from the firehouse, and then we go in and we paint. Any surface that is currently painted, we go in and paint it with an encapsulating paint to seal in any of these carcinogens and toxins that you can imagine been brought back for many, many years. The number one contributor in the firehouse to these environments, I would tell you, would be diesel. After many, many years, benzene is one of the primary, if you will, chemicals that are toxins, I should say, that's produced when diesel exhaust, and it's a known very highly as a very carcinogenic material. And we have diesel recovery systems in firehouses now probably for about 20 years, but before that, the firehouses were contaminated throughout years and years of, if you will, exposure. So that's the process. We're trying to clean as many houses as we can, and I'm very grateful the mayor gave me the ability with in last year's budget and this year's budget to move down that road.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's critical. Doing that, it's important work. Just as an example, I had the opportunity to serve in the Navy for 25 years, and the military is also dealing with a similar issue with burn pits, toxins, breathing in those chemicals throughout the Middle East. And what happens, as you know, is when these returning veterans come home, their health is deteriorating because of, being exposed to chemicals for so long a period of time. But I'm glad that your office is doing that. What is the health of some of the firefighters? Have we experienced a great number of firemen and firefighters that have been hospitalized due to these
Sure.
conditions over the years?
So since 1990, we have buried 190 Boston firefighters. Mm-hmm. I have a number of Boston firefighters who are currently off with cancer, battling, some of them in the battle of their lives, and it's going to be a continuous problem as it grows. There's no silver bullet in all this. There's a lot of things that are contributing to why the fire service right now is so susceptible to these toxins and carcinogens. And probably the number one thing I would tell you, two things, are the fact that plastics, as consumers, everything we purchase is laced with plastics. Everything is a composite, everything is a plastic base, and also flame retardants. Mm-hmm. Flame retardants are sold by the chemical industry as to retard flame spread, but once they combust, they give off these highly toxic chemicals. And our numbers are staggering. I mean, we have members that are, literally in the fight for their life right now. We had one fire, the site power plant fire in South Boston, I think you're very familiar with, on 1st and Summer Street in 2002. Over the course of 2 days, we had over 200 Boston firefighters respond to that fire. And of those 200 Boston firefighters, 50 of them have developed an occupational cancer, cardiac issue, and lung disease, and over 16 of them have succumbed to their exposure. Mm-hmm. So we're in a really, when I talk about primary focus, when you do during the same period of time, 1990 to present, civilian fire death rates in the city are about 158. Yet we've buried over 190 Boston firefighters. And that does not even take into consideration the cardiac deaths that we've suffered throughout that period of time. So we really need to get a handle on how we're working and how we're changing on the fire ground, how we operate, better equipment, better personal protective equipment, and tactically how we do business.
Yeah, Commissioner, I also noticed when a firefighter does retire, does it seem like even after just a few years of retirement that a lot of firefighters die within a couple years? Maybe it's breathing in those toxins and being exposed to these toxins for so many years. It just seems like they die almost immediately after retirement, unfortunately.
There's a significant number of firefighters who retire, and within the first 5 years of their retirement are diagnosed with a significant cancer. We're fortunate in Massachusetts, we have a cancer presumptive law. It needs to go further. We need to push legislators on this topic. We have, currently the presumptive law, you have to be a firefighter for 5 years to be eligible, and you have 5 years post-retirement. We're starting to see firefighters who, there's a gap in coverage. So if you stayed to the age of 65, your 5 years would bring you to age 70 for coverage. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, if you retire at age 50 from a musculoskeletal injury or so on, you get 5 years. Your age for coverage is age 55. So there's a significant gap in where we need to have that legislation. And through the PFFM, Local 718, President Paris, working very hard to try to close that gap of legislation that we can get all firefighters covered up to age 70, 5 years post-mandatory retirement.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you to the mayor for working on that important issue. And as a city council, that's going to be my top issue as it relates to working with you, making sure that health and wellness is the most important issue facing our firefighters across the city. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the documentary, Boston's Bravest, was extremely informative. I suggest anybody who hasn't seen it, please see it. It really is instructive to where we need to get to.
As you mentioned that, Councilor, tomorrow, Dr. Oz, on a national level, is going to be airing Boston Bravest. Tomorrow, I think twice during the day, a half-hour segment at 2 p.m., and then I think again at 1900 or 7 p.m. in the evening. So it's gained national attention.
And it should, because it is a crisis, without question.
Certainly.
And I'm glad that I've been part of this council that has recognized that, and through your leadership, the mayor has tried to address it, at least to the best of our ability to this point, and we need to do more. So thank you. Councilor Flaherty.
Mr. Chairman, great to see you, Commissioner, and your team. Question on this, following on the lines of, I guess, the health and wellness. Do we mandate annual, health physicals every year?
So with the 2011 arbitration award, the city of any firefighter hired after that date has a monetary incentive of 1.5% to have a physical, complete physical. They go to their own doctor. Their doctor has to fill out a checklist of things that we are looking for. But that's just that small demographic. I think we need to be working on that larger demographic. The entire department needs to go for these annual physicals. We've attacked this problem, Councilor, more around education and awareness. And we're starting to see a number of our, I would say, mid-career to later career firefighters are taking advantage of some of that stuff and really pushing, getting those physicals early. I have to take my hat off to Dana Farber. Dana Farber is working with us around that group at the site power plant. We're trying to work through all those members. We have them identified or at the power plant and working them through the process as far as where they are in screenings, testing, advanced testing, and things around that nature.
Great. Commissioner, obviously you've been paying attention. There's an increase in the population down at the South Boston waterfront, and currently dealing with an issue with both Massport and state police not allowing concurrent jurisdiction for our police. So in a situation where there's a fire, say on Massport property, Massport also has a fire department. Are they getting there? Do we have the same sort of turf issues on the fire side that we have currently on the police side?
I say happily not. We are actually down the seaport. First off, they have no presence on the seaport. We are the sole provider of fire service in the city of Boston. At the airport, they do have Massport Fire Department, which deals with all of their runway and issues. When I first became commissioner, there was some confusion, and we were able to hash out an agreement, an MOU with Massport Fire around who will be jurisdictionally in charge if we respond to anything of significance, whether it's in a terminal, whether it's a hazmat or fire. And we've come to a pretty, I consider a very clear understanding on where that lies.
Good. And under your leadership, we've made some significant improvements and upgrades with our apparatus, as well as you referenced on the onset, finally seeing the building of new firehouses and also the complete rehab of others. Any thought been given to a location down around the South Boston waterfront to service lots of new buildings, big buildings? I know you have clearly get K Street and D Street and Purchase Street. Purchase Street is probably where is the closest tower unit, I would assume, right? In
Correct.
the event of a rescue high up, but didn't know whether or not you have an opinion. I know I have an opinion. I know people would love to have a fire station down there.
I think the demographic and the population is going to demand it, to be honest with you. What we're starting to see is our response times are starting to increase, I should say, around what used to be just rush hour. It seemed downtown, you could kind of pinpoint rush hour and know that there was going to be time delays getting places. Now it seems like rush hours all day. Those companies that respond from Purchase Street down into the seaport area especially have a difficult time getting there. We're starting to see their response times increase. To your point, do I have an idea about a location, Council? I would tell you this. In my opinion, I believe where the Rotary is, where the Yankee Lobster is, I would think it'd have to be south of that.
Okay.
Because I think and again, we'd have to look at GSI mapping and run some computer models on it, but I think that would be the area that would probably benefit the city most as far as trying to keep our 4-minute response time in that area of the city.
Okay.
So I think that'd be probably.
And the neighborhood's concern is the drawing of the resources from both K
Absolutely.
and D, so that's an important piece. But glad to know that you're not having the same issues that our police department's having. We also lost, in the previous administration, along with the divestment in equipment and firehouses, we also lost 2 district chief positions. So talking to my colleague, talking about the concerns about the West Roxbury lateral gas line, coupled with, around our hospital areas. So any opportunity to have a conversation about restoring the 2 district chief positions?
I think there's certainly an opportunity to have a conversation around a councilor. This past weekend, or I should say 2 weekends ago, we had significant number of fires in the city. I think it was well broadcast. We had 3 significant multiple alarm fires, 2 simultaneously, which drew heavily on all our resources. To one point where I audited all the chief officers who worked the night before. It was close to relief time when the West Roxbury fire came in, coupled with the Groom Street fire. Ordered them all to stay on duty because we didn't have any chiefs left to respond with inside the city if we had another significant event. So I think there's certainly an opportunity to talk about that, and I think that those consecutive fires highlighted the need to have some depth on the bench as far as if something, we're deploying all the resources. As far as districts go, and, as far as fire ground operations go, safety is our #1 concern of our firefighters, and we put a lot of chiefs on the fire ground for that reason, and which leaves areas of the city depleted of a chief officer. So I think there should certainly be a need to look at that in the future.
And for my colleagues' edification, I think there was 3 fires on or around the same time, kind of going simultaneously. With respect to the West Roxbury one, my colleague's district, I think there was gas involved. It might have been sort of fueled by gas. Was there a delay in a district chief getting there by any chance? Because there's no district chief out in
Well,
that
that district chief who's responsible for that area comes from, if you will, the American Legion Firehouse.
Okay.
And that is a significant distance for him to travel to get there. Okay. I will have to commend the members of the first arriving companies in making key crucial decisions on best to, if you will, contain that fire, because theory would tell me that fire should have consumed that block, because it's all wood frame, no sprinkler systems, and the first arriving officers make crucial decisions about where they placed equipment, got big lines running very quickly to keep it to the building of origin. So, and again, there's a delay for the chief getting there. You rely on your frontline people to make key decisions, and that was a decision made there.
And obviously, life safety and firefighter safety is of paramount importance. So if we can push, at least from my perspective and the council's perspective, we can push to have those 2 district chief positions restored, that would be great. And then finally, on the same subject matter, because I listen when you hear when they go racing by, and sometimes there's a sense of urgency where you can almost tell, like, oh, that's a fire, when you hear that. So I touch into the box, and from the telecommunication standpoint, they were calling to charge the line, but you had 3 things going on at the same time, and so I don't know if that's just the radio I was listening to was kind of getting stepped on, or were the people that were actually calling for stuff getting stepped on. And again, that's a telecommunication issue, multiple things happening at the same time. But as I was listening, just as a sort of a civilian paying attention to what was going on, knowing that there was 3 incidents happening, 2 of them I think kind of raging at the same time, and there was you could hear someone yelling in the background, charge the line, charge the line, and the operator was trying to communicate to charge the line, but it seemed like people were getting stepped on. So I just don't know whether or not, when we get multiple incidents, are we supposed to be on different stations, or how does that work from your perspective?
Well, we have multiple channels, so we'll move our initial primary fire ground channel. So our channel 1 is our everyday communication channel, channel 1. When we have a significant event, especially if building fire, hazmat, we go to channel 2, would be for that event. That channel is dedicated for that event. And if we have a subsequent event, that goes to channel 3, or the incident commander might request an additional channel for evacuation to have people working off that to try to eliminate that stepping on and stepping on people. I got to tell you, I probably have the best fire dispatchers in the country. They've been noted in, you know, even the NIOSH study and the Beacon Street fire went out of their way to make sure they recognized the fire alarm division and those operators. They did a good job controlling the radio traffic, and picking up, as you said, Council, what is critical and what is more routine.
Yep.
And they do a good job.
And what I do notice is they're very clear, they're very succinct in terms of getting the commands and said, so Fire Alarm does an excellent job. I just didn't know if it was the app that I had, that I kind of had multiple traffic, maybe it's tying into all three of them versus those three different situations were happening on three
Once
different
we
stations.
isolate it, I mean, everyone, you'll hear, Councilor, on, you know, struck box at D and First Street, if that exists. Does D and First come together?
Yeah, D and First does come together.
All right, D and First intersect.
D and
Struck
First.
box at D and First, all apparatus responding, switch to channel 2. So they switch everybody immediately if they got something to a different fire ground channel. I don't know what kind of app you're dealing with, but Council, it happens to me sometimes when I'm on channel 1, you'll hear miscommunication. And occasionally you'll have a company officer not change the channel right away, and he'll be on channel 1 when he should have been on 2. And then and as you probably heard, the fire alarm operators do a great job in, you know, having people transition to the right channel.
And then on the app, you can see the number of people signing on because people know there's something going on, or you know, maybe it's just Sparkies, they're just kind of tuning in, but it starts with like 60 and then goes up to like 400 people, and so they're all on the same app. And that's what I was going to get some interference. I said, I hope that the person that's asking to get the line charge is getting the line charge. So, but I appreciate the job you're doing, Commish, with respect to the men and women under your leadership in terms of getting these very necessary and upgrades, if you will, long overdue. Waited more than patiently, and fortunately it took incidents of, you know, brakes failing and, you know, ceilings collapsing and what have you to be able to get the necessary capital investments for your members, as well as the real focus on the health and well-being. And again, because I tune in, you're swapping guys off, men and women off the job when you're tracking how long they've actually been in a situation, and then you swap them out. I think that's huge and probably has led to great dividends in terms of from the health and well-being standpoint of how long someone's exposed to the heat and also to the fumes. So keep up the great work on that stuff. We love the job you guys are doing, and you enjoy a great partnership with the council.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you to your team.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And we've been joined by Councilor Lydia Edwards and Councilor Anissa Sabi-George. Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Chief Finn and everybody for coming here. One of my favorite hearings that we get to go through, in my opinion anyway. I want to thank Richie Parris and Bobby Petiti, of course, and the new face and voice of the Boston Fire Department, Mark Sanders, doing a nice job. You know, I see Mark on the news whenever anything's happening. Very well spoken and very well represented. So, thanks. As far as my questions really been covered a lot with the health awareness, health and wellness, obviously near and dear to me. The capital plan, we're in the middle of the 5-year strategic plan. I've said in many of the hearings, whether it's Public Works or Transportation or Parks Department, this administration is doing a really nice job at refocusing on the capital aspect of it. It's, you know, the men and women with boots on the ground, they can't do the job unless they have the proper equipment. It's just as simple as that. So can you just get a little, I know you were talking about some of the newer houses, and you and I briefly talked about Council Flaherty's line of questioning, Council Flynn's line of questioning about the South Boston waterfront, and possibly saving us some money by recreating the deal we had on, you know, the tower unit on Burgess Street. There's enough building going on over there to not only house a firehouse, but a police station, or at least a satellite police station, as well as an EMS station. So if you could just get a little deeper into the capital plan, where are we with the 5-year plan, and what else do we need to help you not only complete it, but as that 5 years winds down, what's our next steps?
I'm going to actually punt a little bit on this, if you don't mind.
That's okay.
I think I'll let Kathleen speak a little about the capital plan, where we are, but then I'd like Chief Walsh to speak about where we are in the construction phase of Engine 42 in Eggleston Square.
It's amazing how Rescue 2 got done. I wonder how that's on the list. Richie, what? Oh, yeah, Bobby, okay.
And then we can talk about a little bit about Engine 17, which is in Dorchester.
So our capital plan does have the 2 firehouses, Engine 42 in Eggleston Square and Engine 17 up on Meeting House Hill.
Yep.
Yes. We also have, we'll be completing Engine 50, which is a renovation, and we also have plans for Engine 33 for some renovations there as well. And we'll be finishing up, as the Commissioner had said, that Engine 5 will be completed in the fall as well. We're currently working with the Boston City's Housing Lab that is looking at the replacement of firehouses using the P3 concept. So we've just started that process and had a few meetings already with some developers, which was just a Q&A. So how that process actually develops remains to be seen, but we're very hopeful that that will help us and will also help the city with some tax revenue.
Jack, do you want to go on Engine 42?
Good afternoon. It's going to speak a little bit on Engine 42. We've been working about a year and a half now with the engineers. The conceptual plans are complete. The architectural plans were done. We took in the cancer theme and all of it with the hot, warm, and cold zones, which is a lot different than we do business now. Firefighters will come back, have their gear cleaned. They'll go to a assembly line, taking their gear off, put it in the washer, industrial cleaner, take off all their gear. We segregated the areas from cold zone will be where the living quarters is. Hot zone will be where the firefighters come in with their gear. And the warm zone will be anywhere in between. 42 is, we're trying to move out of there in the summer is now the plans. We're going to relocate Rescue 2 to Dorchester. We're still discussing that. Engine 42 and District 9 are going to be relocated to a lot on Atherton Street. We're going to have a mobile firehouse there. It's only 0.3 of a mile. We plan to have some neighborhood meetings before that to discuss and let the neighbors know what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it. Right now, the Engine 42, if we close it down in June or July, scheduled to open in September of 2020. It's just the process that it is. Engine 17, we've been working on that not as long, about a year. With we have a firehouse committee discussing it with the engineers. That depends on the final design. They have an architectural concept now, but the original design is going to have to be changed, we think. And the projected date for that is 2021. And we're taking in all the same cancer concerns. We try to be fair to everyone, just to have a simple design like we did with the fire trucks and apparatus. And it's working out well so far, but 17's a little bit delayed. There's some other problems going on, so that'll be on the back burner for a little bit.
Thanks, Chief. My last question would, were you going to cut me off there?
No.
All right. My last question, Commissioner, we talked a couple years ago about the fire retardant issue. Where are we with the state, and what can we do to continue to help you to change legislation to bring those the chemicals out of the sprayed chemicals that we had talked about during those hearings?
There's a number of things we can do. We successfully passed an ordinance in the city around the topic. There's a national movement towards it. As you can imagine, the chemical industry itself has a pretty strong lobby. They keep pushing the agenda as far as flame retardants. I'd encourage you to watch. There's a real simple video out. It's done by the UL Labs. In the UL Labs, they do a side-by-side room burn, talking about how much more dangerous fires are today than they were 30 years ago. And when they do this room burn, they do one, if you will, modern-day furnishing, something you would typically find in a TV room or den in your own home. And then they do, right next door in another lab, they do a burn of what you would typically find what they call legacy furniture, something that 30 years ago. The modern-day furnishing reaches flashover in 3 minutes, under 3 minutes, which flashover is full room involvement. And the reason it reaches that quickly is because of the plastics, because they're nothing but, if you will, liquefied petroleum products, plastics, the polymers, the chemical content of it. If you compare it to the room burn of the material from 30 years ago, that room sustains fire for almost 30 minutes. So I talk about this quite a bit. My logic on it. If the chemical industry and the flame retardants are doing such a good job, why are we reaching flashover in 3 minutes versus 30 minutes? It's a very logical question that they can't seem to answer, yet they want to pursue embedding and impregnating more material with some of these carcinogens and toxins. So there's a national movement around the council, so hopefully we're going to be on board, we're going to be pushing it. But I also have to take into consideration as you know, the Fire Commission of the City of Boston, public safety, and as far as we're not compromising public safety, and that we have, at least we have redundant or backup plan if we start removing chemicals that we're requiring more sprinkler protection or quicker acting sprinklers and things like that to do that. So there's going to be a balance, but I certainly need I think we need to be cognizant of the chemical industry and where they're going with it.
Okay. Thanks very much, Commissioner.
Thank you. Council Presley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner, and Richie and everyone for being here and for what you do every day. And I wanted to express personal gratitude for your bravery in battling the Treadmark fire. I live in the Caruth across the street, and it was a tense and frightening time for everyone. My family, like many, was displaced, and I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
For that. So I wanted to pick up on, and again, appreciate the prioritization of health and wellness, and I wanted to talk about those wounds that are not always as obvious and physically manifesting right away, and that is the mental health and what is available in the space of behavioral health supports for men and women.
So certainly that is becoming, on the national level in fire service, a paramount concern. They're starting to see firefighters taking their own lives at an increasing rate. The IAFF, the International Association of Firefighters, has actually opened up a center in Maryland where firefighters can go and seek treatment. More locally, what we're doing, we have on-call psychologists, we have Fitness for Duty, we have a robust EAP program, probably the best program in the country. We have
I'm sorry, what is that acronym?
Employees Assistance Program.
Okay.
And we also have a peer support network where firefighters can reach out to their peers and talk, because much like I think anybody, you want to talk to people who actually know what you're talking about. So the peer support network that we have in its incipient stage in the fire department, I think is going to bear us some good fruit. I think people will actually talk about what's going on, the traumatic incidents they're seeing, the PTSD that they're suffering from. So I believe that's going to really bear some good fruit for us. I think it's going to be.
So right now, do people have to self-select that they are in need, or is that mandated after a certain more dramatic incident, or?
Well, if we have a dramatic incident, loss of life, if there's, if you will, tragedy where we happen to lose, whether it's a firefighter or a civilian, we, if you will, dispatch the critical incident stress management team and the peer support group to go in and work with those members, try to get them to talk through it. I think that's the best way you can approach that. And we have professional help that we have on contract, psychologists, a number of psychologists we can refer people to. And again, the employee assistance program. I mean, you know, you look at this opiate crisis, right? We're no different than the rest of society. So we have issues, okay? And I would tell you that our employee assistance program is working through that along with all of the counseling that we have available. So we got a very robust system for people, safety nets, if you will, to get people help they need. Self-identifying is certainly helpful, and then occasionally when you have...
Which is rare.
Yeah, surprisingly. No one wants to be told they have a problem, right? But we do, as people, if you will, do training with our company officers and our chief officers to identify potential at-risk firefighters, and we refer them, although, you know, we get them into the right help we need, we'll dispatch who we need to have a conversation. So I think that our program is very good, and we have this collaboration between 718. Boston Firefighters EAP program is probably one of the oldest in the country. It's the, if you will, the framework that other fire departments, major fire departments across the country have emulated and copied.
Okay,
and that goes back and forth.
So In that vein, I just wanted to, and I'm not sure that I caught in my copious note-taking there, how many psychologists we're talking about and what is the breakdown of that? Because, you know, we've all verbally expressed a commitment, and there are some efforts that have been made internally to have a force that is more representative along gender and race and language lines. And so when it comes to behavioral health, I just wanted to inquire about, you know, one of the ways that we help to grow the force is for people to feel that that it is a safe place for them. And when people don't feel safe, or when they feel vulnerable, and that could be after a fire or for many other reasons, are there any psychologists that are female or that are of color, just in the spirit of cultural and gender competency?
Yes, there is. So we have one psychiatrist, and we have 3 psychologists, and one of the psychologists is a minority female.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, and so picking up on the theme of feeling safe, you mentioned the allegations that were recently chronicled in the press, and I just wanted to better understand, what are the current protocols that are in place if someone feels a victim of sexual harassment or assault? What is the reporting protocol?
Okay, so we need to be made aware of it. So there is a chain of command if there is a concern. I welcome the city's initiative with the mayor to bring in a third party, law firm K. Hodge, attorney K. Hodge, to take a look at it. But as far as reporting, there's a number of, I guess, ways to report if there's an issue in a firehouse. So naturally, through the more traditional paramilitary, through the chain of command, you can report it. You can report through to OHR directly. You can call City Hall directly, EEOC, MCAD, wherever. You can make your concerns known, and certainly if you feel you've been discriminated or harassed, I want to know about it, because I have a zero tolerance for that. This job is too dangerous to have people be fearful when they come into a firehouse. Whether it's a female, a male, no one deserves to be harassed or discriminated against.
Absolutely, and so it's alarming that people that are charged with keeping our public safety could feel so unsafe. And that's why I want to better understand what are the reporting protocols. You know, this is under an investigation, and so we'll be very closely monitoring that.
Yep.
But I wanted to understand, is it, am I correct in my recollection that in order to file a report, to get to the point of even an investigation, you said the chain of command, is there some sort of form that has to be signed by multiple people?
That is just one way. I mean, certainly in a, you know, Council, if you're in a firehouse and you have a supervisor, you'd like to make them aware that there's a problem, I would think. If they're uncomfortable doing that, you can report it directly to fire headquarters, come and see the HR director, Deputy Commissioner Wong, come in with concerns. We've had a number of people, male and female, come in with direct concerns about harassment or potential harassment or personality issues or not being able to get along, whatever. They come in. Then there's, if you will, that's more of the informal reporting, but it's open to everybody.
And are those things tracked? So could you actually quantify a number in the last year of how many reports you've received? Is there an office that monitors that?
Well, that would be HR, Human Resource, under the direction of Deputy Commissioner Wong. I don't have those specific numbers.
I'd be curious because, you know, oftentimes we find there are repeat offenders, you know, so I'd just be curious as to are there trends and patterns, you know, one firehouse over another, one person over another, and just, again, it is so important that everyone feels safe in their workplace, so having that clarity on the numbers allow us that data to be more collectively accountable to make sure that we're being intentional about making it a safe place. So those aren't numbers you could give me right now, but could you?
Yeah, we certainly will make them available. We'll compile it and get it to you.
And as far as the reporting protocol of having to get something signed, you're saying that's just one
That's just one avenue. You know, that's just one avenue. Again, there's, I have an open door policy, and anyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, female, male, can come to my office and have a discussion with me. I'm not so much, if you will, that stand backish commissioner. I make myself available to everybody so they can come and have a conversation, which a number have. But there is that formal process of notifying your immediate superior that there is an issue, so he can take the appropriate steps.
So
Immediate superiors,
HR, or
HR or the city, come right to OHR. They can make a call up here if they don't feel comfortable in their chain of command or they don't feel comfortable with the administration at headquarters. There's certainly many avenues to come forward.
Okay. All right. So I'm sure my colleagues will have additional questions about that, so I don't want to stay there, and thank the chair for his indulgence here. I wanted to just, I'm not sure if your diversity officer will be a part of this panel at all.
He is actually in the crowd.
Oh, okay.
Juan's right
So
there.
is it best to ask the questions through you? Or?
You can ask directly to Juan.
Okay. Do you want to come down? Thank you. And while he's coming, just a question off topic for a moment. In terms of trends, so that we're thinking about fire prevention as well as in education, as the chair of the Public Health Committee, we've seen an increase in cigarette smoking. And I was just wondering if you're finding that as being a resurrected contributor to fires.
Sadly, yes.
Okay.
Sadly, I would tell you, when last year we had a number of fires that we attributed to careless disposal. Some of those fires this past 2 weekends ago, when we had those multiple fires, they're leaning to careless disposal. What I think people have become more aware of, and that's why we're starting to see a lot of larger fires around it, is people don't smoke in their home no more. They'll go out on the back porch, have their cigarette, flick the butt down below, and whether there's leaves and yard debris and things that gather underneath the porch, it'll sit and smolder, and then we start to see these rear porch fires and these fires that start to develop externally of the house and make their way in. So sadly to say, we're starting to see an uptick in smoking, careless disposal, smoke materials. We are.
Are there thoughts about education or awareness campaigns around that? Because I feel that we've seen a decrease in carbon monoxide poisoning because of education and awareness campaigns. So are there efforts around that?
So our public education unit is out there discussing that. This past year we had 2017, they had over 15,000 visits, senior centers, schools, college campuses, community centers. This year we're up to almost 24,000. So the public education component of the department is really out there working to educate the public.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much. So I just, thank you. So I wanted to just better understand the scope of your responsibility. It's my recollection that the budget for your office in its entirety is just your salary, which does not allow for resources for marketing and outreach and other things. So I just wanted to better understand your role. And I think you've been on for 2 years now?
2 years, yes.
Okay. And so, I'm just looking for some data in terms of what your outreach efforts have been, any referrals, what that yield has been, and then also, in particular, curious how often you are conferring with the diverse members right now. So the Vulcans or...
where do I begin? My job as the diversity recruitment officer is obviously to recruit diversity minorities in the department, with the focus on military veterans, because that's kind of the fastest way we can get a quicker turnout in terms of changing the numbers in diversity. As far as outreach, we do a lot of outreach within the schools, the Explorers programs. I created the Teen Fire Academy last summer to kind of increase awareness of how to approach a position in the fire department by taking these kids with the partnership with ABCD, taking some of these teens from at-risk backgrounds and giving them an opportunity in career development, showing them how the tools to succeed in acquiring a position in the Boston Fire Department, and also having mentors associated with the program as well, which are firefighters of color from similar neighborhoods and backgrounds.
Very similar to the Teen Police Academy model, it seems.
Yeah, somewhat.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a short program. It's with ABCD. Different requirements, obviously, with ABCD.
I'm sorry, okay.
And we do a lot of military outreach. We have a partnership with the military transition councils to try to identify specific, minorities and people from the city itself, to really narrow it down to, help us out with our diversity outreach. We've been pretty consistent in the community as far as our outreach with our youth programs, and also just going out to the high schools and career fairs and job fairs. We work with the
minority veterans organizations that you work with?
I work with Commissioner Sterling a lot with a bunch of her events, and just the basic military, recruit military. There's a hiring group called Hiring Our Vets, Hiring Our Veterans, and then there's another group called Recruit Military, and those are really focused around, every specific city. Whenever they come into those cities specifically, they kind of reach out to all those groups specifically.
Okay, thank you. I've gone over time. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We've been joined by Councilor Campbell. Councilor Janey, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, and to your team for all the work that you do. I survived a fire, and I know how scary that is, having been in the house at the time, thinking I had plenty of time to get out, that I could go back and get items that I cared about, like photo albums, and I certainly don't recommend that. I think we all underestimate how quickly fire moves. My sister had a fire 22 years ago, was displaced. I was displaced. My mom just had one 6 years ago, was displaced. 11 days into me being sworn in, there was a major fire in my district down Dudley, a commercial district. It was during rush hour. It was 2-3 days after a major, storm. So I know, that there are several challenges that your department has to deal with. I can't imagine running into a burning building, having seen fire up close and personal. So I do appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm currently trying to support a family that was just displaced, well, several families, in fact, 20 people last weekend who were displaced from a fire, again, in my district. I have some additional questions, building upon some of the questions we heard earlier. It was encouraging to hear you talk about the physical health of our fire department, and I heard some questions around the mental health, that many of our firefighters experience the same things that others in the larger population experience, and I'm wondering if you've also seen an increase around substance abuse or recovery, and what kind of supports are in place for firefighters who may be struggling with those types of issues.
Certainly. If I could just go back to one piece of your monologue there, was as far as having suffered and gone through a fire. So last weekend, 2 weekends ago now, a significant fire, 3 multiple alarms going at the same time. Significant, as Councilor Flaherty mentioned, you can tell the urgency on the radio, receiving calls, people trapped, and so on. I will tell you this, that the Boston Fire Department, compared to our national people of comparable size in cities, whether it's Baltimore or Denver, you start looking at size and population. Up until in 2017, up until December 2017, we had suffered 0 civilian fire deaths in the city. We had tragic fire in the north end. We lost 2 people just before Christmas that year. When you look at our counterparts across the country, and that is a trend, and why I talk about it is it's a trend because of the way we fight fires in the city of Boston. And I have to thank my predecessors on how we fight fire in the city of Boston. We come in hard and fast on first and second alarms. We get the necessary resources on the ground, and tactically we do. And we get a lot of challenging neighborhoods, if you can imagine. Beacon Hill, North End, South Boston, Roxbury. We get some very challenging neighborhoods, very congested area, very densely populated. Just to give you a couple numbers off the top. So 2017, as I mentioned, we lost 2 individuals, civilian fire deaths. 2016, we lost 4. 2015, we lost 3. Okay, do that comparison with Baltimore very similarly sized situated city population-wise. 2017, they had 28 fire deaths. 2016, they had 16 fire deaths. In 15, they had 18 fire deaths. You look at Denver. Denver, that same period of time, had, in 2015, had 20 fire deaths. 2016, 12 fire deaths. 2017, 18 fire deaths. So the city of Boston is well served as far as response to that. I just felt the need to kind of let you know exactly where we sit with our peers as far as how we combat fire in the city of Boston. As far as substance issues, I think we're reflective of society. I think we've all realized that this opiate crisis leaves no one behind. It crosses all economic, social economic lines, and that includes Boston firefighters. And we're working through that. Like I mentioned, we have a very robust employees assistance program. We have a drug testing policy. We have random drug testing. And we want people to be rehabilitated. And we have a program around rehabilitation that gets people back, hopefully gets them clean, and then get them back to work. And we certainly want to be helpful in that regard. So we do have a pretty robust program, but again, I just emphasize the fact that, you know, we're reflective of society and we do have our issues. Thank goodness they're not major issues, but we do have our issues.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And that being said, you know, there are other issues that we see in larger society, sexual misconduct. We heard that reported in the Globe. Mm-hmm. Issues around race, racism. We see that often in our city, and I'm wondering so you've kind of highlighted for us that people can go through the chain of command or report to HR if there's an incident. When these things do happen, is there communication that goes out to, again, affirm what you've said here, which is that there is zero tolerance for these issues? Does that go out to everyone? What happens around the communication piece?
So every year, people have to, if you will, go online and go through the city's policies around, safe work environments. We have our own 1841, Rule 1841, that's reviewed by everybody. They have to go on and acknowledge it. We have safe workplace, anti-harassment policies at the city. We're in the process right now through HR and the city level, OHR, that we're making sure all our members go online and complete those policies and understanding, have a clear understanding of it. We've done a lot of training around the topic. I could actually have Deputy Commissioner Wong talk a little bit about some of the training that we've taken way on and above all of that to train our chief officers and lieutenants and captains, all our frontline supervisors.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. We have done a lot of training in the last couple of years since Commissioner Finn took over as Fire Commissioner for the City of Boston Fire Department. In 2015, we started a lot of training over conflict and confrontation, not only in the firehouses, but we also did that for the civilians. In 2016, we did additional training on diversity and implicit bias and also harassment. We had both someone from the City Hall come over, and we also...
What year was that, I'm sorry?
In 2016, we had the city come over and do a refresher for all the chiefs on harassment and discrimination. In 2017, we repeated that, and we brought in an outside entity to talk to the chiefs even more about diversity issues and on implicit bias issues. And we have what we call Fire College each January, and that's just to bring in all the lieutenants and all the captains, every single lieutenant and captain, and give them a refresher on a lot of different department policies. And this past January, and we started this last fall in some firehouses out in the field, but in January we repeated it, and we actually reviewed the city's policy and the department's respectful workplace policies to every single lieutenant and captain. And I am in the process right now of working with the new female liaison and my HR director, trying to develop further curriculum and how we can roll it out to not just all the chiefs, but the lieutenants and captains and all members of the department.
I think that would be important. I would just echo the concerns that it's very, very important for all of our firefighters to feel safe on the job, for them to be able to do their job effectively. I'm concerned that some of our women firefighters do not feel safe. I would want to make sure that they are safe. I think that these issues, this training, this is an ongoing thing, so making sure that this continues to happen, and not just with the ranking officers, but making sure that all firefighters have access.
And we're very cognizant of it. That's why we are moving forward developing it. And it actually was something that's in the pipeline even prior to all the Globe articles, that we were thinking of how can we roll it out to reach every single member of the department. And that is something that we're working on. It won't happen overnight, but I think we are headed in the right direction.
And one clarifying question for this round, and then I'll yield my time. The diversity officer has been in place for 2 years. Is that you as an individual, or that position has been around for 2 years, or just you as an individual, sir?
Just me.
So that position existed before, and there?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll save my questions for the next, or my additional questions for the next round. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Commissioner Finn, this marks my 8th year on the council. Believe it or not, I'm getting to be the grizzly old veteran, and I think you and your team, and most importantly, the men and women of the Boston Fire Department, things have never been better. Admittedly, there are issues, and want to thank the 2 prior speakers, and thank you, Deputy Commissioner, for the good work. We want to make sure that every firefighter feels supported and has resources, and particularly some of the horrific things that we read about. But I've been very just impressed in terms of operations, in terms of responsiveness. I was at the scene of the fire in West Roxbury last Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago. It could have been so much worse. Thank God no lives were lost. It happened very, very early in the morning. It started around 6 a.m. Most people were home. Is it correct that it wasn't necessarily caused by a gas leak, but it was fueled by a gas leak? Is that a fair assessment?
That's still under investigation, Council. We were, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg, which came first.
Understood.
So we're waiting to see what the, we have that regulator and it's being tested. So
Fair enough.
Before we get there, we'll have to.
Understood, and appreciate sort of the prudent or the cautious language. Suffice it to say, whatever happened on an older wood frame building, it spread very, very quickly. And this happened just to see President Paris and just so many of your men and women down there working, to see the collaboration with BPD and Boston EMS as well as the MBTA, which came by with buses, was great. A week before that, I was doing a ride-along with Boston Police Captain Jack Danilicki, and there was a pretty substantial fire in Mattapan. And then remember running into you probably 2 or so months ago in Jamaica Plain. It just so happened I was at Stony Brook Station. I was going to a meeting when that horrific fire engulfed a daycare. And once again, thank God there were no fatalities. It seems as though, and perhaps this is just my observation, but are we seeing an increase in events, in fires?
Our multiple alarms are certainly up, Councilor. We're up.
What do you think has caused that? More people in the city, more activity in the city?
I wish I had the answer.
Yeah.
I would say there's some of that. I think the population growth and the potential. I think you're seeing, I mean, look at new construction. Councilor Presley mentioned the Treadmark building.
Yeah.
That was, it was a pretty horrific fire for us. Those buildings, in my opinion, are very dangerous buildings. And there's a ton of them going up in the city. All these podium constructed buildings, I think they present a significant fire hazard, especially when they're under construction. When they are completed, they're relatively safe. They rely solely on sprinkler protection. They substitute, if you will, mass with geometry, so we're not getting a strong building components. But I think there's a whole host of things. I think the reemergence of cigarette smoking again, smoking materials. I think there's a whole host of things that are contributing to it.
Yeah. That's interesting. And then just sort of going over some of the line items on the budget, permanent employees is up $1.5 million, but in the, I think in the revolving funds is down. Is that just a sort of reclassification?
I'll punt.
Kathy?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, the salaries are up for any of the step increases.
Okay.
So those are the transitional career steps. We don't have any of the collective bargaining yet. We're still in negotiation, so that's that's not there. And yes, the revolving funds, actually, 2 of our revolving funds were discontinued. So when we do get reimbursed for any events, like, for example, the Hyde Park natural gas explosion, we did get monies from National Grid to about $64,000 to pay for mostly all of our foam that we used, and that goes back into the general fund.
Mostly all, not all, though? They didn't, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you said you got about $64,000, which was used for...
Which was reimbursing us for the use of time and foam.
Okay.
For that particular fire.
Okay, good. How do you find work, I don't want to go too off on a tangent, but given the proliferation of gas leaks and as we can see, what can the effect of those be? How do you work with the utilities in terms of addressing those to prevent further explosions or, God forbid, deaths and fires?
Well, I tell you, Councilor, in your district, I believe Hyde Park's your district?
No, it's Councilor McCarthy's district. He'll,
that area, okay.
Yeah. We share Rosendale, but he's got all of Hyde Park.
Okay. That fire this past winter was a very challenging fire for us with the gas main there. That was...
How many days did that last?
I think it was 3 when we finally got to extinguishing it. And to be honest with you, it was a prudent decision to make.
Yeah.
The conditions were...
Because that was the single degree, that was what they called the snap of the
single
season.
Digits over New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and a couple of days after. If we, that fire was 20 yards in either direction, we would have had a serious problem.
Wow.
Because it was just probably perfectly located with a vacant lot right in front of it. You had probably 3 or 4 three-deckers to the right, and you had an apartment complex to the left. The fact that if we shut that gas main down, we would have probably put 9,000 homes out of gas, out of heat, in those sub-zero temperatures. So it was a prudent decision to do that. Gas fires, and in this most recent one, is certainly concerning to me. I'm waiting patiently for the investigation to come back and tell us what it looks like. But gas fires are really rare, but when they occur, they're pretty significant.
Sure.
So.
And are the utilities, do they coordinate with you? Do they share information with you? Is there room for improvement?
I will tell you this, in Hyde Park, we had a great collaboration with them on where we were with that, because we deferred to some of their engineers to bring us some solutions before we decided whether we were going to extinguish the fire, shut it down or not. I would tell you, in West Roxbury, a little bit different story, because they couldn't locate the shutoff immediately. That area they had no records of what was in the development. We were looking for gate boxes shut off in the street that we can actually shut the gas off to a specific building. We had a hard time locating it. We actually did not locate the gate box. We were just kind of blessed that National Grid, their street crews are great. The street crew, one of the more seasoned members of that crew, thought he remembered where a shutoff was, and he was able to locate it out on VFW Parkway, which once we located it, we were able to shut the gas down and extinguish the fire.
Good.
So.
Good, excellent. And then what's the timeline on Engine 42 in Roxbury?
Well, Chief Walsh will.
On Engine 42, we're trying to move the companies out of there in the summer, probably late June.
And they'll go to Roxbury and Jamaica Plain?
The rescue is going to be located in Dorchester, probably at Engine 16 and Galvin Boulevard.
Okay.
Engine 42 and District 9 are going to be located it's actually a parking lot now in the rear of 125 Amory.
Oh, perfect. So you're going to keep a temporary space, not
So
just give it to extra.
It's going to be temporary firehouse, Counselor, and that should be for...
And that's very close for those that may not know. 125 Amory to the current location
it's 3/10 of a mile.
Exactly, yeah.
And the other, it's not going to open until September of 2020, the new firehouse, but
Great.
we're hoping it's a little bit early, but...
Great, terrific. And then, thank you for that. And then finally, this is probably for you, Kathy. I noticed in the line item 52500, garbage waste removal, seems to fluctuate very dramatically. In 16, it was $50,000, $193 in 17, $87,000 last year, and then up to $274. I'm just curious, why is it so inconsistent?
We did have 1 year, and I think you just mentioned it in 17, where that waste disposal included some asbestos removal.
I see.
So it's not it doesn't say asbestos removal, but it falls into that line item.
So do we anticipate more asbestos removal this year? Is that why it's the highest it's been at 274?
We have other waste in that for the industrial cleaning, so that's why it's gone up.
Gotcha. And it should. I mean, we want to, you know, I don't need to tell you guys some of the statistics. We need to make sure that our men and women who serve us, you know, are protected, and we address this. I was just curious more than anything else. Thank you all for the great work you do. We're really proud of you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Edwards.
So I just wanted to say first, I got to work with your department when I was Deputy Director of the Office of Housing Stability, and our immediate response to fires resulted in us creating these fire cards. I think they're in several languages, 4 languages, and you guys were great about getting that out to the communities. I think you even took some with you along with the Red Cross to make sure that, you know, you were immediately streamlining people to prevent them from being displaced. So thank you so much. I also represent East Boston, and I'm very pleased to see the capital investment in that station over in East Boston and also in Charlestown as well, who I also represent. But I wanted to pick up on the line of questioning concerning what we've not only read in the Globe, but I think is really endemic of what a tough conversation that needs to happen. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's 16 women in total?
That's correct.
Out of 1,500?
1,500.
So for all of the incredible successes that you have, and you have many, and the heroic deeds that you have, and you have many, I hate to be so bold, but I would call 16 out of 1,500 a failure.
I would agree.
I'm sorry?
I would agree. Great.
And so since we agree then, where I'm wondering is how we're still here. By that I mean, what in your opinion is the biggest barrier to women getting into the Boston Fire Department?
Well, I think if we take a look at it nationally, and with the fire services nationally, I think let's start. So if you look at New York City.
I know, it's 1/3 of a percentage, but here in Boston, I'm really, just based on your perspective in Boston, what's going on here?
I think there's a few issues, I think.
Okay.
I would go around the strength and agility test could be a barrier. This past exam, we only had, I believe it was 59 females who actually signed up for the exam. And that does not automatically, I mean, when you say 59 females, depending what they score, and that's not even considering if they got through the LPAT, the second portion of the exam. Okay, so that was just the written portion of the exam. We do not have a list yet, so it'll be interesting to see how they fare, if you will, once they've gone through the LPAT and who is advanced out of that 59 who've completed the physical agilities test. And then I would tell you where they land on the list as far as if they have a preference.
In terms of veterans,
Veterans,
okay.
survivors, 402A, 402B, or they could have a language skill that could be very helpful for us.
So, and was it 89 women who took the test or applied last year in 2016, and none
89,
of them,
I think, was in 2016.
and none of them made the cut?
No.
No. So, when I am pleased to see that you have, when you put your minds to it and you're intentional about the training and resources to provide for your firefighters, it gets done. And so I'm really wondering about how intentional you are about getting women in the fire department.
Well, I would tell you, I personally, very intent. I would tell you that I operate under a civil service system, okay? I do not have the ability to select who I would like to hire. When we are going to put a class on, I request a list from the state, and I cannot deviate from that list, and I have to hire from that list.
Do you partner with or work with, I think it's the International Association of Women in Fire? Have you partnered with, I've seen the trades, for example, who also have an issue with diversity, work as young as with partnering with middle schools and high schools and making sure that their presence is known and getting them prepared for and getting them excited about being firefighters?
So I think Juan, the diversity officer, spoke to that. I mean, we've created a whole bunch of things in the last 3 years. I go through a list of my opening remarks of what we've done. As far as the ABCD Academy, that was predominantly, well, I'll ask Juan. I mean, how many females?
We had 2 female firefighters.
Two.
Oh, 2 female firefighters, but how many?
Out of 4 mentors, so we made sure to make sure that half of the mentors were a woman. And the teams that we brought in.
You know what? Can I just interject, because it's going to be hard shouting back and forth. Maybe take the microphone, that'd be great.
In term, it's okay.
So the Teen Academy, we made sure to include young women as well. It's definitely something that we're looking forward to initiate more and be more present. And also with our recruitment effort this past year before the exam, and, you know, starting from November till up to the exam, we had, I think, 4 or 5 of the women as part of our recruitment team to go out there and to work with our community and putting the word out on the exam.
So part of being intentional is also having an accountability toward end goals. So I'm curious about what are your hardline goals in terms of numbers or percentages and timelines to reach those goals, and who will be held accountable if they're not met?
Well, as far as accountability, that would, the buck stops here, okay? That's with me. Again, I think I put forward to you some of my barriers to why we haven't hired more female firefighters. I have changed the female liaison because she comes from a military background. She understands the issue clearly, and she was charged with being out in the community and to educate, and she's going to be working closely with Juan on the female firefighters, if you will, as far as attracting more females to the job. We're going to put all our effort forward in that regard. But again, I have barriers to whether people sign up for the exam, can complete the physical agilities test, and if they land on a list where they're reachable.
And in terms of learning from other cities, have you reached out to cities that have higher percentages? I've seen that Minneapolis might, if I'm correct, it's 16% of their fire department are women. Have you reached out to and tried to learn from other successful models?
So I would tell you this, that those departments that have higher numbers of female firefighters are a dual role department. They are not one single role department. They are fire-based EMS systems.
That's what Minneapolis is?
I'm pretty confident Minneapolis is one of the fire-based EMS systems.
Mm-hmm.
When you start to see larger numbers of female firefighters, they are because the department is a dual-role, cross-trained department. They're not single-rolled.
Which is BFD.
BFD.
Okay, because we separate the two.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, and over 80% of the fire service provides EMS across this country.
It's Councilor Wong? I'm sorry, did I get your name correct? Commissioner Wong, I apologize. I thought you were an attorney, so I was using the counselor. But Commissioner.
I'm your only attorney.
You had mentioned that there was implicit bias training in 2016 and 17?
2017.
2017. Was that the first time?
Since I've been back. I've only rejoined the fire department since late 2014. Whether they've previously held it, I do not know that information.
So when you get that information back, what do you do with the implicit bias data or information?
What I have done is I actually partnered with an outside entity to have conducted that training. Mm-hmm. They actually also did our conflict and confrontation training, and I have continuously been working with them, explaining some of our challenges and how they can develop and tailor a curriculum that would be more appropriate for the Boston Fire Department.
So when you get, when you get the data back, you are creating a training program with that data on implicit bias?
When you say data, I'm not sure what you mean by
So when you take the test for implicit bias, the person could find out what they do or don't have implicit biases for or against.
Let me clarify. They talk about implicit bias. It's not that everyone takes an implicit bias test.
Would you be willing to have your chiefs and your management team take those tests?
I think that that's something that we can consider, but I think that that requires further thought how we move forward and what's the best course of training for our membership, because firefighters have a different mental state, if you will, and so we have to carefully craft something that would be amenable and fruitful and achievable for them.
So Harvard actually has a really good test for implicit bias that's open, and I really encourage you, it's free also, but
Yes,
if you
I'm
feel
aware of
it's
that.
necessary, and it has very little to do with training or the profession the person chooses, it actually gets to the direct implicit bias that they have. And the reason why I suggest this is because learning about it as some sort of ether other than is very easy for someone to say that, well, someone else has that, or I have it, but I don't know what it is, and I don't know who it's for or against. And I've taken the test. Taking it is really revealing about what and who you knee-jerk react to. And then being able to know that about yourself and being able to compensate for that within the confines of being a firefighter or whatever profession that you choose is vital. So along with, and again, I think that's also showing some sort of intentionality, is actually having them take the test instead of being told about it. And when you get that data, then you can actually tailor real training instead of more ether training that is not, I think, at all effective, because I've sent through many of those trainings as well. I also think once a year, is that the plan to do this training?
Actually, no. We plan to do continuous training, and one of the ideas that we have right now, and since we're still in a lot of the development phase, I can't say for sure what we're going to be doing, but in preliminary discussions with my own team and my own staff, working with the new female liaison, working with my HR director, we want to incorporate a lot of this anti-harassment, discrimination type of training into the regular training that a lot of the firefighters go through, so that it will be continuous and ongoing.
And when will that start?
As soon as we develop a good curriculum.
Great. So could you give me a deadline? What's the sense of urgency to do that?
They actually met and started creating a curriculum that will be rolled out before this current recruit class graduates, so that's a good start, and we hope to take that and springboard that and hopefully roll it out and develop and build it into the normal everyday training that all firefighters go through and make it a component of their training.
And is that budgeted for? Do you have the resources to do that?
Yes.
That's
Yes,
in the
it's
current
part of the
budget
training
request? Okay. I'll wait till the second round.
Okay, thanks. Councilor Sabi George.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here and your, I think, detailed response. I have just one quick follow-up for you, Commissioner, about the response or the alarm, the number of multiple alarms. And I know in your earlier presentation you talked about traffic in the city. Could that be adding to the multiple alarms? Just the fire is a little bit longer to get going?
It certainly could. I can't say, there's nothing that jumps right out at me, Council, but you know, it's just factual that the quicker we can get there, the better the outcome. So if we have delays, whether it's traffic or companies out of quarters or wherever they are, it certainly delays the response. The citizens of Boston are blessed that we have probably under a 4-minute response time to almost 95% of the time, which is pretty quick. You call us, we're there. So the response time is, and every time we talk about, as Councilor Flaherty mentioned, we talked about Seaport and different areas and relocating people as far as Council O'Malley, as far as Engine 42 and keeping the engine company in that district, in that sub-district. Response time is critical, so we want to make sure we maintain that presence. So I would tell you, the simple answer to your question would be that traffic certainly could be involved in delaying response, which could help multiples to complicate a little quicker.
Great, thank you. I was reviewing some of my notes from last year's hearing and the hearing before that, and we didn't receive the SAFER grant for this upcoming fiscal year. Is that?
We did not apply for it this.
Oh, we didn't apply for it.
No, we
Okay.
did not apply for it.
Is it reason why?
We just, the specifics of the SAFER grant kind of put us outside the box this time around. I think next time we'll be better positioned to obtain it.
Okay. And then can we talk a little bit about upcoming retirements? I also saw in my old notes that for fiscal year 19 that we'd see maybe 50 to 60 retirements. pending. Can we talk a little bit about the impact that will have on the force and what our plans are to build up our FTEs?
So we do have, in this budget, we do have 60 new recruits. What we're starting to see occur over the next 5 years, starting to see the transition of the late 70 crowd, 1970 crowd that came on the department, which we did some significant hiring. We're starting to see them transition out of the department. So we're going to see some uptick in our numbers going forward for over the next 4 to 5 years. We'll start to see some larger retirements in those time periods.
And will that lend itself an opportunity for us to really put some effort into greater diversity in those incoming classes?
Hopefully. This last class that we currently have in the academy, we were able to exercise the language fluency component of the state law. And we actually, this class here is, it's not perfect, but it's about 28% diverse. And so we're going to be working, and we're going to go into this class of 60. We're going to be looking to do the same.
Thank you. And then speaking of retirements, could we talk a little bit about any pending or outstanding litigation on old equipment? I don't know if I know last year I had a note that we were in the midst of some litigation on old equipment that had failed with, I think it was engines.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, the KME issue, which we have reached settlement with the manufacturer. We're right now working with them. They were going to, if you will, re-engine and retransmission that equipment, which we will be able to utilize going forward, and then we'll probably try to offload the bulk of it.
Great. And then just one last question for this round, because I'm just referring back to some of my notes from last year. We talked about just planning for the proliferation of the cannabis industry and some of the challenges Boston Fire might face, especially with the ability to grow certain quantities at home and the demands of both home grow and for sale grow, both medical and recreational, sort of the fire safety and code safety implications that might have.
I'm just going to speak broadly on it. I've talked to my counterpart in Denver around the topic. I'm not so much concerned with the commercial side of this, to be honest with you. I'm more concerned with the homegrown side of what's going to take place in Councilor Sioma's own backyard. We have a lot of college kids who occupy a lot of those brownstones and buildings over in Beacon Street and Boylston Street and all that neighborhood. I think that's going to be a challenge. I know, each individual can have 6 plants. The extraction process, when they use butane and propane to extract, college kids are very ingenious around what they like to do, I guess. So I could see the dynamic of who's going to have the better pot, who's growing the strongest. I can see all this stuff coming to fruition. I think it adds, certainly when you add anything, I mentioned the uptick in the careless disposal. When you start to add, if they're smoking, or whether it's an edible, I really have concerns around the extraction process, the growth process around heat lamps and halogen lamps, which add another heat source into a dwelling, in which, we've had some significant tragedies around our colleges in fire safety. And so I have real concerns around that. And then, truly, when you start to look at some of our older neighborhoods, South Boston, East Boston, all wood frame, old wood frame buildings, the fact that we could have people growing things inside their basements or in their apartments brings a lot of concern to me, and we're going to have to monitor it very closely.
Great. That's it for this round. Thank you.
Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Siomo, and thank you guys, Commissioner. It's great to see you and your incredible team, and Local 718. Thank you for being here as well. Thank you for the work that you guys do. You obviously often don't get credit for some of the positive things, and I also want to thank Juan, who got up here earlier to talk about some of his work. I don't have a lot of questions. Obviously, we stay in communication on many things, and I appreciate that. And you guys are always available to communicate, even if we don't always always agree. I think there's always room for discussion and moving forward on issues I think we both care about, particularly when it comes to diversity in terms of the numbers of women and folks of color, not just at entry-level positions, but also at the higher level positions. Councilor McCarthy and I filed that hearing order. We're trying to settle on some dates right now to have conversations about what are some short-term initiatives and long-term initiatives and solutions to change those numbers. I think we were in the beginning operating with the public safety agencies in separate spaces, and oftentimes talking to folks of color and veterans in different spaces. And frankly, I said, I'm done doing that. I think this is an opportunity for us all to come together, to see what might be working in other public safety agencies, to see how each agency is different. The barriers may be a little different. I think we talk about civil service. Every agency is dealing with that. And so what does that mean? How may it be a barrier? How may it not? So I think we're not going to cover that in one budget hearing, but the goal is to have several policy briefings with the goal of coming out of maybe 3 or 4 policy briefings with some short-term and long-term solutions. So I look forward to you guys being partners in that work. I have to thank you, Commissioner, as well as Juan, for getting me and your HR team for getting me the data really quickly to be able to put together the hearing order to get current numbers, to begin having the conversation, but not just to stay in a space of conversation, but to move forward to find some solutions. I will tell you, I think Councilor Flaherty might have brought this up in some conversations thus far that have been happening in different spaces. We've been looking at whether it's, the captains in the police department. I think Councilor Flaherty brought up the district chiefs, 5 and 10, what it means to either create new positions, to restore new positions, and to take from existing lists where there might be some folks of color, or in the police department with captains, there's a woman at the top of the list. And if we created a space for a captain, we could put her in there and immediately change those numbers. So I think there's some things that possibly could happen in the short term to change our numbers. And then I think there's some things that have to happen in the long term. But just curious as to, I miss the question and answer period with respect to District 5 and 10. Is there an appetite to bring that back? What was the conversation? I apologize for asking the question again. I got pulled.
I certainly recognize the need. I was just explaining to council that this 2 weekends ago we had those 3 consecutive fires going at the same time, and there was no chief officers left in the city. And we used to have some depth when we had those additional districts. We put a lot of chiefs on the fire ground around safety, around containment. So I'm certainly open to suggestions around those districts.
This is great. Thank you, Commissioner. And I'll add just that I've also reached out to one of the things that I think the council, I'm speaking with the council as an institution, we lack is sometimes the human capital to do very thorough research. We're all pulled in different directions, whether it's constituent services or other policy initiatives that we're working on, and there's many. But we have these incredible institutions right here in the city of Boston. So I've been in conversations with some institutions to see who might be looking at short-term and long-term solutions when it comes to public diversity and public safety agencies, and can really do a deep dive into what's happening around the country, pinpointing that there are folks around the country who may be getting good numbers, but and have good representation, or at least representation that's more representative of the demographics of their respective cities. But they may not be dealing with civil service, or what you were talking about, the fire department having its own recruiting and enrollment, which is different from other places, as Councilor Edwards suggested. But who can do a deep dive? So the goal is to have these briefings, but at the same time have someone with maybe a more objective lens to be able to do that deep dive simultaneously, to bring thoughts of what might be happening that we could be thinking about doing or not. But I know that we're not going to cover this, and I learned that quickly in my first term, in one conversation, one hearing. And we shouldn't be thinking about it in just the context of, say, the fire department or the police department. Chief Hooley really wants to do something with his numbers as well. So I think this is a unique opportunity in time for us to have the conversation as a collective. And I appreciate your partnership. And Juan in particular, thank you for getting us the data and getting it to us quickly, and just being very thoughtful in the conversation related to this issue of diversity in our public safety agencies. And go ahead, Commissioner, I feel like you're about to say something.
I am.
Go ahead, go ahead. Yeah.
Just to give you a little background. So, the civil service promotional exam. So, is competitive exam, open to all members, and so on, right? So, in 2000, just to give you some numbers, and our system's working. Just to give you some numbers, okay? So, in 2000, now look at, could they be working better? Certainly, okay?
Yes.
There was 0 deputy chiefs of minority chiefs, deputies on the job. There was 1 black district chief. There was 1 captain. There was 10 lieutenants. Hispanic, there was 1 district chief, 1 captain, and 5 lieutenants. When you look 18 years later, we have 2 minority deputies, which is the highest civil service rank, achieved on their own. You have 3 black district chiefs. You have 3 Hispanic district chiefs. You have 6 black captains. You have 3 Hispanic captains. And this is the best number of all. Lieutenants. You have 34 black lieutenants, and you have 16 Hispanic lieutenants, which is at the entry level, the toughest test to take. That's always the toughest hurdle to come over. And what is really missed in that topic is that it's a competitive exam. Everyone can compete at the same level. And the fact that they earn the respect and trust and confidence of the men they serve, I think that is remarkable, that we're moving in that direction, that we're starting to see the advancement all on the same playing field. And I think that's what, and we're starting to see that moving through the department. Okay, so we do better than that? Sure.
Absolutely.
Let's absolutely do better. But those numbers speak for themselves. And I believe the postal system currently is fair. Everyone competes at the same level. Everyone has, education is a component, time and service is a component, seniority is a component, and then the multiple choice exam where people actually have to study and commit to the exam process. So we're starting to see those numbers moving, I consider, very dramatically in the right direction. So I believe that that's a good thing.
No, I agree that we're seeing movement, and frankly, when looking at the fire department's numbers, at that entry level in particular, and particularly at black firefighters, you saw an increase that most people don't necessarily talk about, or frankly give anyone credit for. But I think, like you said, there's more work that we can do, and I think the initial conversation will include a conversation about the numbers, and everyone's perspective on those numbers is different. If you're looking at where you have come from to where you are, that's a good thing, that the numbers have changed and gone up. If you're looking at the population of the city of Boston and the demographics of the city of Boston, and then you're comparing the demographics of the department's numbers, there's a big gap. If you look at entry versus top tier positions, it's not representative of the city of Boston's demographics. So my goal is to not just talk about the numbers, talk about what has worked to actually increase those numbers, and each department is doing different things. And I know EMS, for example, has just rolled out that recruiting certification program with workforce development department, trends department, that hopefully we'll see their numbers change as a result of that new initiative. We'll see. But I think everyone agrees that there's more that we can be doing to make sure that our public safety agencies are representative of the people of color and women in the city of Boston. I'm a firm believer that you get things done, not necessarily always having an adversarial position, but actually sitting around the table and saying, okay, where are we and where do we want to go? Don't get me wrong, I've already talked to some veterans, frankly, veterans that I actually grew in my relationship with because of the hearing order related to the cadet program for the fire department. And folks, well, we didn't start on the same page. I'm coming to find out one guy who represents many of those veterans lives in my district. And we continued conversations. And I said, yes, there's a lot of protected categories. And I'm not talking about everyone. Right now, the only two that I'm focused on are women and people of color. And so if we can just narrow the conversation for a minute on those two and making sure that our agencies are representative of the city of Boston when it comes to those two categories, that's what I want to talk about. And if there are veterans in those categories that we are missing or who are going through the process but falling through the cracks, whether in fire or police, then we have to talk about that. But one thing I think is exciting is partnering with Councilor McCarthy. It's an opportunity for all of us to come together, to have a conversation, to have the back and forth, but hopefully with the goal of changing those numbers with respect to our public safety agencies. And also at the same time, not just talk about the numbers not being representative, but also representative of those demographics of the city, but also talking about some of the positives, which often get lost, the media doesn't talk about, we don't necessarily even talk about in the council sometimes. I learn about some of these initiatives or the Teen Academy, other things that folks are doing with respect to this issue, often just by picking up the phone and calling some people in your department or running into them in Dorchester and continuing the conversation around diversity. So the goal is to also highlight what we are doing that's positive, what else we could be doing, and then to make sure that at the end of the day, we're not talking about this in 5-10 years, but that we've actually made some movement together. So I'm not going to drag on. Just one more question is, when does Kay start in terms of the independent investigation as to what's happening?
She's already started.
She's already started. Yes. Does she have a timeline around how long it might take her to dig into the weeds of the various allegations?
No, I just wanted to be thorough.
Okay.
So we haven't put a definitive timeline on it.
And at some point, I imagine she will come back and report. Either will she draft a written report at the end of her investigation?
Yes.
Okay. And I will look out for that report and continue the conversation about where we go from there. Thank you, Councilor Siomo. Thank you, Commissioner, and your team. And thank you, Juan, as well.
Thank you. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor. I had a few more questions. Commissioner, when firefighters respond to, say it's the innovative district, there's a lot of emerging technology down there, or the BU Biolab, if they're exposed to any type of chemicals or any type of situation that, could have some health risks for them down the line, what's the protocol following that, coming out of that area? What type of medical assistance would they retrieve?
Well, we just not only have the innovation lab, but if you look at even the Longwood Medical Area, I mean, all these labs that the city, I think there's over 5,000 labs in the city currently. So our hazmat response is very robust, to say the least, well-trained. But if members are exposed, there's a process in reporting exposure, or if we believe they've been exposed, we document the exposure. We advise people to seek medical attention. Make sure, and this goes back to some of the initiatives around making sure they're washing their gear, cleaning their hoods, and all those things around that to make sure that they're thoroughly decontaminated. The big thing in the fire service right now is this gross decon after the fire scene, so that we're basically not bringing any of these toxins and carcinogens back to the firehouses. So, we do have a process. There's a reporting process, and then there's medical follow-up if we feel the need.
Commissioner, I'm often at the VA in West Roxbury or Jamaica Plain. There's a lot of women veterans. The VA does a great job of tracking women veterans, as does the state and the city. Is there any way, the diversity officer can do more outreach to some of the women veterans that we could easily identify through the VA or through the state or the city as well?
You can always do better, Counselor, I'm sure. I know Juan has been very committed. He's been working with Giselle, Commissioner of Veteran Services, articulating our need, and then also working with her as far as identifying female veterans along with minority veterans so that we can actively pursue them. Some of the things that we have underway now with some of these interventions, if you will, with some of these younger diverse groups, we won't see the fruition of that for a few years because they're going to have to go in the military, serve in the military, and then come out with tracking them through their military career and directing them into the fire service after that.
Commissioner, I was I was in near my house about a year ago with 80th Street, and there was a construction company. There was a welder doing some work without a fire detail, and Eddie immediately called the fire department, the police department, but the fire department shut it down. Is that common that construction companies would do welding work without some type of fire detail? Or?
Well, since the tragedy on Beacon Street, we have that Hot Works program. We worked with union and non-union contractors about educating their members on the safety. I will tell you, after the tragedy in 2014, we've seen our details increase dramatically. I think people recognize the hazard. But I would tell you that I'm sure there's unprotected welding and burning and cutting going on in the city every day. I would tell you, we just don't have the resources to go and police all of that, but we do have a construction unit that goes out and is actively out there looking at all of that. You know, it's like anything. People cut corners, and they'll try to get around that obstacle, and they do.
I know a lot of the construction development is happening in my district, and I want to make sure that if any welding that does take place, you know, there's always a fire detail there, and you know, maybe we can do some more outreach to some of these construction companies to, you know, stress to them the importance of having a detail all the time.
The insurance industry embraces it. You know, you think they'd be pushing back. The insurance industry embraces the whole concept with the general contractors as far as details. It's a safety blanket. Right. You know, it's insurance policy. So.
The EMS chief, Chief Hooley was here earlier. I know you talked about it with Michael, with Council Flaherty. I'd also love to see a fire presence down the South Boston waterfront, an EMS presence down there. That's something I hope I can work with you on down the road as well, Commissioner.
I think we'll be working at it at some point. As timelines go, as far as construction starts too, I think we need to, you know, move that up in everybody's radar as things start to develop down, especially that lower end. I consider that area that's more vulnerable response times.
Right. And then my final question. I know the mayor has given you a lot of funding on maintenance apparatus, replacing it. I know that's critical, making sure that our equipment works, and preventive maintenance is key. Do you have enough money in the budget for all maintenance issues?
We do, and when we don't, we get emergency funding for it.
Okay.
So, I mean, as I mentioned, the average age of our buildings is 76 years old, so when something goes, we have to come back to do a budget amendment to, you know, with the heating system and things like that. So I think we're adequately funded in those regards, and as those things occur, you know, we've been able to work through it.
And I know this mayor is committed to making sure that we do have enough money in the budget for maintenance. That's critical. That's key. Unlike the previous administration, we didn't have enough money in the maintenance department. So that's an issue I want to stay on top of as well, Commissioner.
Well, in Mayor Walsh's first term, his first 4 years, he's committed almost $100 million to the Boston Fire Department capital, close to in capital and along the operational budget. We didn't see that level of commitment in 20 years. And I think people recognize that, and I got to thank Mayor Walsh for recognizing that and giving me the ability, the resources to make sure we make the changes and get things done that we need to get done.
Several weeks ago, Commissioner, I was with you. I had the honor to attend the retirement banquet for the Boston firefighters that retired, and it was great to you know, see the great pride and respect these older people had for the job. You know, they worked hard, they served our city well, and just the amount of pride they had for our city and for the fire department was great to see. So I just wanted to say congratulations to you and your team as well, and to 718.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on the details. So when a welder goes in to get a permit from ISD, aren't they told they have to, is there any cross communication like with ISD? So somebody goes in for a permit, they want to weld, aren't they referred immediately?
Well, actually, they come to us.
Okay.
They come to us on that, so we're right on top of it.
They come directly to you?
Right.
Great, okay. Counselor Edwards?
Just to, again, follow up on some of the questions I had before, and then also to ask about some of the programs. So we were talking about the implicit bias training, and one of the things I had suggested was that the actual firefighters take the test. Another suggestion, or I wonder if you considered having them, once they're recruited, instead of just at the chief level, actually having your new recruits take the test as well. It's almost like a physical fitness test as well, checking out where they are, what's going on, and making sure that they're very aware of the things that they have going on within themselves. You considered that?
It's a great suggestion. Absolutely. We haven't considered it, but we will now.
Okay. And also, tell me about your recruitment with colleges or female athletes. Have you focused on them? Have you gone to them? I would hope some of the collegiate level athletes that we have who are women could meet some of your physical tests and your academic or your written tests as well.
Well, that's the hope with our new female liaison, that she'll have that be dedicated to working in those different environments to first off make females more aware of the benefits of fire service, and hopefully be able to recruit in those, if you will, rich areas for us.
In terms of your, she's not here, is she?
No, she's not.
Okay. And in terms of your liaison, this position was created when?
The positions existed probably back to 2004 or 5, somewhere around that period of time.
And has there been any recruitment in colleges for women athletes?
I can't speak for the former female liaisons. I don't believe that the most recent female liaison did much in that regard. So we've charged the new female liaison, which happened to be firefighter Margaret Conley. That's her charge, is to work directly into the community, looking at all of our female hiring and what the best way to approach it.
And so a year from now, we're going to be having a budget hearing. And so what are your goals in terms of women in the Boston Fire Department?
Okay, so...
Because I firmly believe if you're going to be intentional, you got to kind of know where you want to go, even if it's incremental, even if it is just maintaining the 16 that you have. What are your goals?
Well, I think we need to internally have a further conversation on specifics. I would think on the larger topic, I would hope that we've had a number of interactions with females who might be interested in careers in the fire service. We just went through a testing cycle, so that won't gear up now for another year and a half. So it'll be hard to measure anything next year as far as if anyone has actually signed up for the exam, if we've been successful. We're going to look at some of the statutory abilities I have around language fluency to see if there's females that we could move as a Par 8 in the hiring process. We did that in the last exam around language. HRD in the past, Counselor, has denied a special Par 8 list for females as recently as 2011. So we need to refocus, and that's what we're looking at.
So, and I appreciate that. So there's several streams, but in terms of numbers by next year, do you have, or do you plan to have a set of numbers or a percentage increase as a goal? Because
I think I just explained that there's a number of barriers. Okay, so
no. Well, yes, and you've certainly explained that, and I've heard that. I don't want you to think I've dismissed them or think in any way, shape, or form that these aren't real. But part of being intentional about getting something done is knowing what you want and seeing the goal or the number or the percentage increase. And so,
do you have a suggestion?
I thought I did in terms of the
Well, I
recruitment
mean,
and so on and
there's
so
a way
forth.
to, there's a way to look at
In
it.
terms of number?
Yeah,
Well,
there's
the
a way.
minimum, maintain the 16 you have.
Well, I think
Right.
that is a given. We're going to maintain 16, okay? We're hopefully going to increase. We'll have to see what the list present to us as far as eligible and reachable candidates, okay? It doesn't matter what my goal is. If my goal is, if I set the goal at 20 and I get 2, you can tell me I fell short. Realistically, I have to wait to see what the list presents to me to see if there's reachable candidates. It's not the ability, I do not have the ability to go down and be selective.
I understand that.
So I have to, when you talk goals, I would tell you we'll have goals around how many interactions our female liaison has had in some of those environments.
Okay.
We can identify how many visits, much like we do with our public education.
Or how many people women she's going to talk to.
Absolutely.
So you
How
can set
many
those goals.
Yeah, we can set some goals around
Right.
those topics, but actual hiring in women on the Boston Fire Department, again, it'd be a disservice to you and to me to put out some fictitious goal. We certainly can have goals around how many interactions, how many times we've been out to visit sites, how many times we've educated people about the role of the Boston Fire Department and the need for more female firefighters. That we can do. It'd be fictitious for me to tell you that I'm going to have a goal of hiring 10 more female firefighters, because I don't have that ability.
And I understand right now in this conversation that ability might be it's impossible. But I would encourage you to try and get to those goals, because my biggest concern is being able to say after a year of conversations and you've met the conversation goal, we still have the same problem and no increase, or we're seeing, God forbid, a decrease. So again, I understand right now in this conversation having a number goal might not be possible. I would encourage, or I'm hopeful that you would commit to try and get one.
Again, we will have goals around how many interactions and what our, if you will, the workload of our female liaison. But as far as trying to put something substantive and concrete as a number and attainable, I think it'd be misleading on my part.
In terms of other, just switching the topic then, and I guess that's, so just to end that then, I don't know how then we can hold anyone accountable without goals. I'll just say that. I don't know how you can set, you don't set limits, you don't set standards, you don't set where we're going to go. I don't know how then people are going to be held accountable. So I'll just say that. Switching topics, talking about safety specifically in my district and some of the pilot programs that the ISD has come up with, for example, the ADU, which is the basement program or the accessory dwelling unit program. They've allowed for folks to be permitted to have additional units within their homes. And I was curious about your own perceptions. Were you consulted on the safety of that and the basement apartments that are now increasing and getting permitted in East Boston, I think Mattapan and Jamaica Plain?
I'll let Chief Walsh answer that. Chief Walsh, the Fire Prevention Bureau reports directly to Chief Walsh, so I'll have him answer it. And
That's the first I've heard of it, but I can ask the fire marshal if he's had any interactions with ISD over this.
Really? Well, it's a program that's growing, apparently, and we're having a lot more basement apartments come in.
I'm not saying we're not involved. I just
okay.
I don't have any knowledge of it, so I'll talk to the fire marshal and get back to you on that.
Thank you. I was just curious because I'd hoped it was a success. I know that they have promoted the sprinkler system being a requirement for any of the two families becoming threes or three families becoming fours, and they're requiring not for the whole house to be wired in sprinklers, but just the new unit. And so I was curious.
So that being said, they'd have to submit plan reviews, I'm sure, to have that done. So I'll speak to the fire marshal.
Thank you. And I could be wrong, but I'm also curious about the relationship between East Boston and Chelsea and the fire. Do we exchange or do we help each other out in going to fires?
yeah, we have a mutual aid agreement. There's with the 35 cities and towns in Greater Boston. We have a very good working relationship with all of our partners in Greater Boston. We are in Chelsea quite a bit, as you can imagine. We have, Chelsea has a significant fire problem at times, and we are usually right there on their first or second alarm. We send a number of resources to Chelsea every year. Actually, I think I have numbers for you if you're interested.
Yeah, I was curious in that mutual aid agreement too. Is there a reimbursement to our fire department, or how
No,
does that work?
it's a mutually.
There's
there's no reimbursement.
Okay.
We are probably the biggest provider of mutual aid, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
We provide mutual aid to all of our surrounding partners. And
Yeah.
it's good business.
And there's a lot to do.
There's a lot to do, and certainly it's good about being good neighbors.
Okay. And then I noticed recently there was I thought a very positive tweet from the Boston Fire Department about the vacancy program and receivership, specifically that a lot of vacant buildings are also where a lot of the fires are started. Do you still find that trend to be true, that it's vacant?
It certainly is a trend, not just in Boston, but it's a trend throughout the state, throughout the country. Vacant buildings are where people tend to congregate. We've suffered in Massachusetts a significant tragedy in Worcester, where we lost 6 firefighters in a vacant building. We've had some significant vacant building fires in the city this year. So it is an issue, and we're pretty robust, and the relationship we have with ISD is very good on all levels and all accounting. We work with them to make sure we identify those buildings, we get them boarded up, and that also if there's any what we call hazardous buildings, where they might be missing supports, floorboards and things, structural members, which would put our members in jeopardy. If there was a significant fire, the structure's already weakened, we placard the building to give our people, if you will, foreknowledge about what's going on. So there is an issue in the fire service, certainly around vacant buildings, but we work pretty well with ISD on the whole topic, identifying them and getting them identified for us.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Or the numbers on the.
You want to just here you go. Yeah. This is Chief Fontano.
Yeah. No, our mutual aid, like the commissioner said, is pretty, people rely on Boston a lot, as you can imagine, and we rely on Chelsea in particular for East Boston fires, but for mutual aid incidents where outside of Boston in the last year, we've had, since last July, so it's not a full year, 182. We've sent 432 units, could be engines, ladders, chiefs, whatever, but individualized 432. Mutual aid incidents where companies like Chelsea are coming into Boston, the 75. And units in totality sent, again, individual units from outside the city coming in have been 82. So we send a little more out than we get because we're fortunate to have more resources than a lot of our neighboring towns and cities. But Chelsea's probably one of the most frequent that we interact with because of the geographical concerns of East Boston, and also the ease with the Meridian Street Bridge and the Chelsea Street Bridge that we can get in and out of Chelsea. And from Charlestown into Somerville, that's another common transition between departments as well.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Councilor Asabi-George.
Thank you again. And so I've got a couple questions on sharps and Narcan use. I know that we've seen an increase over the years of Narcan use or response to OD calls in which our firefighters are using Narcan. Could we talk a little bit about the number of how many doses have been delivered, maybe over the course of last fiscal year? And
I don't have it by fiscal year, Council, but I can give you by calendar year if you'd like. So in 2000, you certainly see the dramatic uptick, okay? So 2014 was 122 cases, 15, 402, 16, 629, 17, 804, and to date, about 197, almost 200 Narcan administering right now.
Right.
On that topic, we have a pretty unique program that our EAP program is coordinated with, along with the Mayor's Office of Recovery Service, with Jen Tracy And Public Health Commission, we call it knock and talk. And what it is if we have a good address, we go to an address and we come upon an overdose at that address, a medical situation, that we send a team back within the next 24, 48 hours to offer supports, assistance, whether it's trying to get counseling, get that individual into treatment, but also to, if you will, educate the parents, the uncle, the aunts, the brother, the sister on what's available. And we also, again, working with the Mayor's Office of Recovery Service, which does a great job, they will donate, or not just donate, but they will give the individuals Narcan. And I think trending our numbers, and we're starting to see, we certainly have the responses. We track these by a certain code, which is, we call it a 321N, N being to determine Narcan. We are still, our number of responses to drug-related incidents are certainly going up, but our administering are coming down, it appears, and I think a lot of that is because the availability of Narcan, that individual being Narcan before we get there, and then we're just providing rescue breathing and things like that to maintain the person until the EMS arrives.
Have we been able to increase the role that Boston Fire can play in some of that response before EMS gets there? Because I know many of our firefighters are, I think they're all EMT certified.
We have close to 1,100 nationally certified EMTs in the Boston Fire Department.
But there's also a limit to how much support they can give an individual while waiting for EMS?
Well, EMTs can deliver the basic function as an EMT. We also have 26 paramedics, but they can't function as a paramedic because we're not integrated into the system. So I think the fact that we have so many EMTs, we get over 200 EMTs on duty every day in the city and every neighborhood, is a benefit to the city. You're getting that advanced trained medical responder within 4 minutes, which can make the difference between life and death, as we all know.
And then 26 paramedics, but they're not able to utilize
those skill sets.
Those skills. Can we change that?
Well, it take a broader conversation. I think, Council, it's a bigger conversation.
Okay. I'll save it for another time then. And then last year we talked a little bit about Sharp's disposal boxes that you have on the interior of your firehouses, I think for response to calls, and then you dispose of them. Can we talk a little bit about the trends and the collection numbers?
So I couldn't give you specifics on the collection numbers because I'm not even sure they count how many needles go into a shop box. I really don't know.
They have
but
some volume and weight probably corresponds. If we can get that another time,
I could probably get that to you.
And knowing that. Thank you. And then I had asked this question earlier of Boston EMS, so it's probably appropriate to ask it of you as well. I have a concern with a piece of property that they lease at great expense to the city of Boston. Does Boston Fire have any property that they lease for either a firehouse or another purpose?
Not that I'm aware. Oh, yeah, so we have two, I guess you could say. So that Engine 10's quarters, which is part of the high-rise, that's part of International Place. And then we have an agreement with Harvard. We have property over at Holton Street that we use for our Special Operations Division, where we do all our hazmat training, technical rescue training, and so on there.
And do we have an idea of what the lease agreement is, the cost of that lease at Harvard?
It's actually in kind. There is none.
Oh, great. Okay. And is that shared? Is that shared? This opportunity. Is that shared with EMS? Because they had mentioned a Harvard garage or a location.
No, that is not.
Oh, that's.
They do a lot of training with us. Mm-hmm. We bring EMS over to do some training around those topics, but they don't have any presence there, permanent presence.
And then my last note, just carry over from last year, because I had asked it then, was hydrant checks. Where are we? And are we in order with defective hydrants and fixing them?
I got to tell you, Boston Water and Sewer has done a great job. The hydrant system in the city of Boston has never been better. Henry Vitale and his crowd has done a fabulous job with replacing hydrants, and the water pressure has never been as good either. I mean, we get basically almost static pressure, almost 60 to 80 pounds at times, which is incredible. But we do have some replacements going on. We internally do hydrant inspections every year, usually in the fall, just before the winter, we test the hydrants. I shouldn't say we test them. We don't crack the barrels. We don't open them. But we check their physical condition from the exterior, and we check to see if there's any water in the barrel, because that's when you get the frozen hydrants. And then if we do find defects, we give it to water and sewer, and they're usually fixed in a very short period of time if we do. So I'm very confident and comfortable with the hydrant system, and Boston Water and Sewer does a great job with that.
Great. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Just one quick housekeeping issue. BFD had a revolving fund, and I don't know if it's been discontinued. I guess this is for you, Kath. Has it been discontinued?
Which one?
I think it was the hazmat.
Yeah, the 21E
yes.
has been closed, but
Closed.
we can still abide by the law and get reimbursement for any hazmat situations.
Okay, and it just goes through your regular operational budget then?
That's correct.
Great.
It actually goes to the general fund.
Great.
Yep.
Okay.
Councilor George, I just got one follow-up for you.
Sure.
Deputy Commissioner Wong just gave me a note. We're tenant at will at Holton Street.
Yes.
We have a lease with tenant at will there.
So isn't EMS.
Okay, so, all right.
We're going to work on that.
Okay, thanks.
As long as it's not a home share agreement, you're all good.
President Paris, did you wish to testify? We'll go to public testimony. You are good? Oh, go ahead. Be my guest.
What's round two?
You like my humor? Oh, it'll be in the humor.
I don't find it humorous anymore. I'm only kidding. I don't take this personally. I think it's ridiculous.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilors? Oh, they all left me.
They'll review the tape.
Oh, will they? No, I know. You're absolutely right. I'll leave them my phone number. They know where to find me. Listen, I've been testifying since 2010 with budget. The last administration, who beat us up for 20 years, who I like to enjoy beating up every time I have an opportunity. You know, when we came here for the budget, they were cutting jobs. Our hospital reps were very important for our firefighters. That, you know, we had 9 guys that got injured at that fire 2 weekends ago. It was important. They were cutting apparatus. They weren't replacing them for 6 or 7 years. Average age was over 25 years. I'd like to thank the mayor and the commissioner and his team. They've done a great job. The average age of apparatus right now is 6.5 years old. Wow. And that's good. But I got to thank the city council and the mayor. And, you know, it's about safety for the firefighters and the citizens in the city of Boston. It's important. And they understand that our firefighters are important. The men and women of Local 718. In 1999, we lost 12 active members, 9 with heart attack and 3 with cancer. And we tried to bring a well fitness proposal together since 1999, and they didn't want to do it. As Councilor Flaherty brought up earlier about physicals, we were in bargaining and we wanted to do it, and they didn't want to, they didn't care about us. We brought up the cancer deaths, they didn't care, heart attack. So it's good that this administration cares about our firefighters. The Senate in Washington just passed unanimously a registry for cancer registry, and the IFF 718 PFFM, we've been working on this, and they passed it unanimously because they saw what Boston's doing with 718, and the mayor and the commissioner and his team are doing. So they hopefully will help firefighters down the road. We'll never see it, but in 20 years, that, you know, we'll find out that we can help firefighters with cancer and their families. We're up there on the Hill right now helping them to extend the age of after 5 years. So it's great to, when we can work together and get stuff done. Yeah, we have our disagreements, you know, but as J.J. Jennings said, you can agree to disagree. The men and women in this job do a great job. Out in the field, arson squad, our training academy, the fire prevention. I've heard some about fire details. Those guys, the men and women up in fire prevention work very hard. They're out in the streets making sure that the contractors are doing the right thing. Fire alarm construction, maintaining them red boxes so if someone needs emergency, they can hook that lever and there's a fire truck there within 3 to 4 minutes. So it's great that we're replacing jobs, promotions. The last administration, if a chief retired, you just retired a chief and promoted a chief. What this administration does, chief, captain, and lieutenant. So this administration's doing the right thing, and I appreciate that. I had to do a lot of fighting with the last administration. And they try to wear us down. I always said, we're going to be here and you're going to be gone. I was right. I want to thank Juan. He's doing a great job. He's worked with us. You know, 718 does not get involved in hiring, but I'll take my hat off. Men and women that serve this country, the veterans, deserve to come home and have an opportunity to get this job. My son, I just was visiting down in North Carolina, Marine Corps, and there was some females and black kids there and black Marines, and I said to them, hey, come to Boston when you get out. There's a kid from Hyde Park, black kid from Hyde Park, and went in with my son. He met him in boot camp, and I asked him, like, what are you going to do in 3 years? And he didn't know, and I said, I'll get in touch with you. So the veterans do deserve it. They're defending our country. They're leaving their families at 18 years old, and you don't know what's... I pray to God that my son comes home healthy in 4 years, along with every other man and woman that serve this country. They mentioned the EAP. We have a great EAP program. People come down to the Union Hall and reach out to us. It's all private. It's the, as the commissioner said, it's the model through the International of Firefighters, and they also, International just opened up a, council. It's in Baltimore, and it's great, and it's helping firefighters. But we also send them out throughout the whole, you know, United States. We, in Philadelphia, we have them in Florida, we have them all over. I could go on and on. It's been a long afternoon, and I just want to thank the commissioner and his team, everybody in headquarters. It's doing a great job, and I want to thank you for letting me speak today.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank your son for his service,
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you. So that concludes today's hearing. I want to thank you again, Commissioner, your entire team, all the men and women in the field that, you know, protect our citizens, our residents, and our visitors every day. This hearing is adjourned.